Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Sonic X. Okay, so this episode of Sonic X is literally just an excuse to reintroduce the Chaotix back into the story, and obviously, antics ensue. Yeah, and also there isn't much plot-related stuff that happens in this episode. There's like one thing at the start and at the ends that are important, but for the most part, it's just the guy screwing around. It's just a group screwing around in space. That's all it really is. But in any case, the episode opens up with Chuck assembling Nelson Lindsay Thorndike to Chris's lab back on Earth, and he tells him that he's discovered good and bad news regarding the device that Chris built. The bad news is that Chris designed it to go to Sonic's world, and he designed it in a way where only he can use it. So, long story short, none of the other human characters are going to be following Sonic and his friends out into space anytime soon. But the good news with that is that while they can't transport themselves, Chuck figured out that they can actually transport the material objects to the Sonic's world, and proceed to do exactly that. And as Vanilla is kind of gathered at the Angel Island shrine, wondering how her daughter's doing and how all of her friends are handling things out in space, suddenly all of Chris's belongings are suddenly teleported into Sonic's world and land on top of her. And obviously she has no idea what to do with it, but then realizes that it's most likely Chris's stuff, and so she decides to actually call up the Chaotix to help her deliver it for her. So long story short, she calls them up. Vector is in the middle of sleeping, and and asks Charmy to get the phone. Charmy picks up the phone and drops it on Vector's head. Which Vector remarks isn't what he meant, but he does pick it up and is a little bit cranky at first, but then he finds out that it's Vanilla on the other end of the line, so his demeanor completely changes, and she tells him that he has a job for them, and that it's very important that they meet her in person. So they proceed to do exactly that. Although after he hangs up, he's still visibly annoyed at Charmy. And for good reason. Charmy dropped a rotary phone on his head. Those things are heavy. But in any case, once they realize they have a job, they realize they need to actually go and find Espio, who they find out is actually meditating in the corner, and so to actually wake them up, they grab the pepper grinder from the kitchen and proceed to sprinkle it on him to get him to sneeze and wake up, which does work. He winds up waking himself up, and he winds up waking up, although he remarks that they could have just used an alarm clock for basically the same effect. And sure, they remark that they could have done that, but it wouldn't have been as fun. But in any case, with the trio of them now up and at 'em, they then proceed to go to Vanilla's house, where she reveals all of the stuff that Chris's family has teleported to her, and remarks that she wants the three of them to actually go deliver it to Chris in space, and go check up on Cream and make sure she's all right. And while Vector is more than happy to accept the job, SBL points out the inherent problem with it in that they can't go to space. They don't have a ship. So of course that left them wondering about where they're actually supposed to get a ship. At which point, a spaceship just inexplicably falls out of the sky. And in any case, they realize they now have a ship, which Charmy remarks solves that problem. At which point, they proceed to gear up the ship and load it up with all of Chris's stuff, and also this is a little revealed later, but they also put their entire detective agency on the back of it, so that they could actually just pick up all of their stuff and leave. And with that, they head into space. Meanwhile, as I said, everybody's literally just screwing around in space. Cosmo and Cream are actually admiring the stars and stargazing out the window, with Cosmo remarking that it actually is quite a peaceful way to pass the time when they're not fighting for their lives. And also Sonic and Knuckles are trying and failing to play a game of chess. Knuckles is taking way too long to make his move, so Sonic decides to actually go for a quick run while Knuckles is busy moving, and and there's obviously not much space to run, so Sonic just kind of runs around the ship a little bit until Knuckles comes to get him. At which point Knuckles finally makes a move. It's implied to be a checkmate, but by that point Sonic actually gets up and doesn't. And Sonic has long since left, and Knuckles has no idea where he went. So he goes out on the ship to actually go and find him. And sure enough, he interrupts Sonic's run to tell him that it's his turn. But Sonic winds up falling off the ship and can't get back. Which Knuckles quickly realizes is a problem. So he proceeds to tell Amy about it, and after realizing they need to actually go and rescue him right away, she grabs a rope and a couple of jetpacks and sends Knuckles out off the end of the ship to actually go and find Sonic. On the bridge, she then proceeds to tell everybody what happened about how Sonic fell off the ship and Knuckles is going to go get him, which obviously everybody panics about, but they point out that it'll probably be fine. But they point out it'll probably be fine since Knuckles is going to go get him. At which point the Chaotix actually show up in their ship and begin to start tailing the Cyclone so that they can actually deliver Chris's stuff and complete their mission. But here's where the antics actually kick in. They said that they don't know that it's actually the Vector, Espio, and Charmy. They just know that it's a ship of an unidentified origin, and they have no idea where it came from. So, and obviously Tails does a scan of it to make sure that it isn't actually carrying any weapons. But nonetheless, they conclude that the ship itself is probably a Metarex ship, and begin to panic because there's a possibility that it'll actually intercept them and board them. So they decide to actually get their ship battle ready to actually deal with any Metarex that may come on board. And at which point antics ensue as each of the Chaotix try in their own way to actually board the ship and let them know that they're there. It starts with Vector, who decides to go all by his lonesome and actually goes to knock on the door of the bridge to actually go and find them. But he does succeed in finding the bridge, but they turn off the lights and wind up ambushing him and beating the shit out of him with various items that they just have handy. So yeah, he winds up going back and reporting what happened about how they attacked him. So Espio decides that it's probably his turn to actually go and deal with it. So he turns himself invisible and proceeds to actually infiltrate the ship that way. Meanwhile, while Amy conveniently is trying to paint the ship a new coat of paint, because of the scuffle that they had with the quote unquote Metarex. At which point Espio comes in and accidentally gets splashed with paint, which obviously causes her to freak out because there shouldn't be something there. And upon painting it, concludes that Espio is indeed another Metarex, and proceeds to tell the rest of the group what she saw, and they also come to the conclusion that Espio is a Metarex and proceed to trample him and outright attack him. So he comes back and goes to go tell them that how he failed and how he's dishonored his name as a ninja. But at which point Charmy decides to actually go and investigate with Espio merely remarking that it's dangerous and that he should be careful. At which point he remarks that he will be, and then proceeds to put on a bunch of safety gear so that he doesn't get injured nearly as badly. Meanwhile, Cream and Cosmo have actually prepared cake for everybody and are currently snacking on. Everybody's currently snacking on cake with everybody remarking that it's very good and that Cream is definitely a really good baker. And Amy just unofficially declares Cream to be the next chef, and that they could actually she could actually make cake for them any time they want. With everybody just kind of laughing it off. At which point Charmy walks in, remarks that he would absolutely love some cake, and they proceed to beat the shit out of him as well. So they all proceed to actually come back, and once all three of the Chaotix have been beaten the shit out of in turn, Vector decides that they're actually going to have to come up with a plan B, and decides that they'll have to just leave for now and regroup and figure out a way to actually figure out how to actually let them know that they're not enemies. So with that, they then proceed to get back on their ship and proceed to fly off, which Chris notes seems like they're actually taking off and flying away, but Tails points out that he's not going to let the quote-unquote Metarex escape. So he decides that he's actually going to go catch up with them in the X-Tornado with with Tails pointing with Chris actually pointing out that it may be a little bit dangerous for Tails to actually go off on his own, but Amy merely points out the fact that they already scanned the ship and know there's not any weapons, so it's probably fine. And with that, Tails then boards the X-Tornado in one of the show's boarding sequences, and he flies off in the X-Tornado. So he then proceeds to try and catch up and intercept the quote unquote Metarex ship. Oh, up until he recognizes the Chaotix detective agency on top of it, and noting that it looks familiar, he starts to have second doubts about the fact that it may be a Metarex, and he then proceeds, and then after closing the distance and actually looking through the skylight on their roof, he concludes that it likely isn't a Metarex at all. As he actually looks closer at it, he realizes that there actually are the Chaotix, and then proceeds to try and contact them through the radio to point out that he may have made a misunderstanding and that he didn't know it was them. But it's at this point where, ironically, their radio doesn't actually work, so Tails can't actually signal them. So, and at which point SBO remarks that they must be trying to negotiate, but remarks that they're not actually going to be able, but Vector really remarks that they're not actually going to be able to catch them, and they're not going to fall for it that easily, and remarks that the possibility remains that it could be a trick. So they proceed to take off and go into hyperspeed, which obviously Tails can't match in the X-Tornado, and he very much points this out. So he calls up Chris to actually come and both pick him up, and B, try and intercept the Chaotix ships to kind of capture them. With Chris pointing out that he does have that there is a grabber claw on the Cyclone, and remarks that he's actually been meaning to use it. So they decide to actually go off and try and grab the ship. And as Chris is actually en route to pick Tails up, he actually clears up the misunderstanding about how it's not actually Metarex, and explains how it's actually the Chaotix, and that they're not supposed to be enemies. But in any case, despite the Chaotix best efforts to actually evade the blue Cyclone, they do manage to bring them aboard and stop and grabs them with their claws, and with the claw on the bottom of the ship, and pulls them inside. At which point, once they come out of the ship, the rest of the group profusely apologizes to them for beating the shit out of them and mistaking them for Metarex, which is understandable, and Vector and the others kind of return that sentiment in return, and points out that repercussions for beating them up earlier, they asked everybody to actually take out all the stuff that Chris's family left for him, and they proceed to bring everything to Chris's room, with Chris actually thanking Vector for coming all this way to bring him his stuff, and proceeds to tell him that he can actually unpack everything himself and that he doesn't need Vector's help. With that, Vector actually solemnly leaves, and Chris quickly realizes that shortly after this stuff arrived, that his grandpa most likely is the one who sent it all to him and figured it out, and then realizes that his parents are likely worried about him because he has no way of actually contacting them and letting them know that he's actually safe and sound in space. So yeah, for that reason, he starts realizing that he does need to find a way to contact them, but he hopes in the meantime that they'll suffice in hopefully knowing that he got his stuff and that he's okay. Meanwhile, the Chaotix actually get ready to get back into their ship and leave. Now that their mission is mostly done, but Cream and Cosmo actually stop them and ask them to actually stay for some cake. Which Charmy obviously perks up at very happily and says basically yes please, but SBO actually interrupts him, pointing out that what Charmy means to say is that they finished their mission and now they're leaving, but Vector just kind of takes the middle ground between both of them, pointing out that at the very least they could stay for some cake, since obviously they're offering hospitality and trying to make up for the fact that they got into a fight earlier. So yeah, of course, Vector actually comes back. Vector brings the rest of the Chaotix in, and they decide to eat some cake with Vector apparently eating 3 slices by himself. But in case, while Cream is actually bringing him another piece of cake, he then proceeds to ask her why she's in space. he kind of points out that he's being a little bit nosy, but he does point out that it doesn't feel like it's a very safe thing to actually. It doesn't seem like a very safe place to actually be playing around in space, which Cream obviously takes major offense at because she's not playing around. She's trying to help her friends with something of cosmic significance. And Cosmo does indeed clarify that as well, pointing out that they're trying to stop the Metarex and save all life in the galaxy. But Vector, and while Vector understands that, he also points out that his mom is worried about her and that Vanilla wants Cream to come back home, which we know is a lie. And after Cream leaves in a huff, SPL even points out that was indeed that Vanilla have never actually said that she wanted Cream to come home. But Vector, of course, he using his brilliant detective skills, just actually quote unquote read between the lines and determined that what Vanilla actually wanted was for them to bring her daughter home at any cost, which with Charmy just kind of pointing out that Vector has clearly lost it and just kind of does a whole song and dance routine where he points out Vector has clearly lost his marbles. And Espio tries and fails to reason with Vector about on this point and quickly realizes that it's no use because obviously Vector is too deluded to actually understand what Espio is trying to tell him. But in case they decide to actually kidnap Cream, because that's always a good idea. Kidnapping somebody is never a good idea, especially if they're supposed to be your quote-unquote friends. I mean, obviously it's kind of done with good interest, but not necessarily. Don't do that. But in case Vector then proceeds to pull out a bag and proceeds to actually sneak onto the deck and tries to while everybody else is distracted and trying to search for Chaos Emeralds, Vector winds up slipping the bag over Cream and Cheese's heads and then proceeds to pull them on board their ship. With nobody being the wiser until Vector and his crew actually leave. At which point they realize that Cream and Cheese are actually missing, and also Cosmo, oddly enough, because they didn't realize, they don't only notice that Cosmo has just kind of disappeared as well. But in any case, Vector then proceeds to actually return back to his own ship and they take off, and then he proceeds to let Cream and Cheese out of the bag, as well as Cosmo, who Vector remarks is a little surprised to see because he didn't actually kidnap her. She came of her own volition, and even remarks that she's not going to let Vector take Cream away, because pointing out that obviously it's not her choice to actually take Cream back to her mother. But Vector just kind of doesn't listen, pointing out that it doesn't actually concern Cosmo, and then tries to fight her, which doesn't wind up working because Cosmo literally just bounces around the room and just kind of floats away from him every time he tries to actually land a punch. So he just kind of winds up smacking into all the equipment in the bridge. So yeah, they are actually unable to actually fight back against her. But in any case, meanwhile, Knuckles eventually finds Sonic floating out in space and brings him the spare jetpack that he brought, and Sonic thanks him for his help and proceeds to actually go fly back to the ship and tells him that he'll meet him there. With Knuckles actually asking Sonic to wait for a minute because apparently Knuckles ran out of fuel, according to himself, and it almost ran out of fuel at least, and doesn't really have a way to actually get back to the ship. So yeah, they're eventually going to have to reel him in. But in any case, Sonic then proceeds to arrive back at the ship as Chris and Tails and Amy are actually formulating a plan to actually get Cream Cheese and Cosmo back. And upon being filled in on this situation, he immediately goes off to go find Vector and confront him. So he winds up landing on the ship while the blue tornado cyclone actually tries to grab onto the ship, but Espio just winds up blowing up the claw so they can't. At which point Sonic arrives and points out that he doesn't fully understand the full story about what's going on, but remarks that he's not going to let Vector just kidnap Cream. So Vector points out that he's not going to take no for an answer and remarks that he's going to bring Cream back to her mom regardless of whether she wants to or not. And he's not going to fight Sonic if that is indeed the case. And with that, they then proceed to get into a very brief fight where Sonic swiftly kicks Vector's ass. So yeah, Vector tries and fails to face off against Sonic, and obviously, since it's Sonic, that doesn't go very well. But in any case, with that, Sonic then proceeds to ask Vector if he gives up, and points out that even if he had the best of intentions, he points out that there's only one person who can actually decide whether or not Cream stays or not, and Chris actually returns that sentiment as well, showing up in a spacesuit, and remarks that the only person who can really decide whether or not Cream stays or goes is Cream. So they obviously ask Cream what she wants to do, and Cream tells them that she's staying with, because obviously this is a very important thing for her, and obviously she wants to be able to go on an adventure with her friends. So of course she's staying. And Vector, finally hearing it from Cream's mouth herself, points out that they finished their mission, and they decide to actually go back to Mobius and tell Vanilla what they found out. But as the other Sonic in the group actually go back to their ship, he tells Cream as she's leaving to shoot her mother a line every once in a while, and then Charmy snaps a photo of her, and they proceed to leave. At which point Vanilla suddenly gets a fax, which is revealed to be the picture of Cream that Charmy took, and Vanilla is happy to see that her daughter is all right, and also remarks that now that she knows that her daughter is all right, she can stop worrying as much, pointing out that while she does miss her a lot, she does recognize that her daughter is doing what she believes to be the right thing, and has faith that her daughter will come home safe and sound. So for the time being, she's just kind of chill with that. But in case, one last thing actually happens at the end of the episode. Back on Eggman's ship, because who only really shows up for like 5 seconds at the end, because he's not really relevant to the plot of the episode. He shows up. He's shown to be looking for Chaos Emeralds as well, and Deco and Boko are having trouble doing it. Of course, Boko points out that it's likely they won't actually find any Chaos Emeralds anytime soon. But in any case, as they're doing that, Rouge actually is poking around Eggman's ship, and eventually finds a sealed off room and decides to actually open it. And upon closer inspection, discovers a strange capsule in the middle of the room, and wonders what it's doing there, but then has a moment of recollection and wonders if it's who she thinks it is, and then the episode ends. So yeah, this episode for the most part, again, doesn't really have any plot related significance in it. I mean, it's literally just it's kind of a fillery episode where the Chaotix show up and antics just ensue, which of course has happened a lot in Sonic X, but this is like the first fillery episode of the 3rd season, which is kind of interesting. But in any case, it does introduce some interesting things, namely that Chris's parents are worried about him and sent him all of his stuff, which is going to wind up becoming an emotional plot point later. And obviously, there's a strange capsule on board Eggman's ship, and I'm not going to throw out any predictions, but I think it's Shadow, because he's been shown to be. We don't really know what happened to him in the context of Sonic X. He just kind of disappeared, and I think he's in the capsule. I'm not entirely 100%, but I think he's in the capsule, considering that was how he was stored the last time he was found. I'm getting a funny feeling that he's in the capsule. But in any case, yeah, if it is indeed Shadow in the capsule, that's going to be interesting, because that's going to just introduce another character in the story, because obviously in the context of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, he does disappear for a bit, but then he eventually shows back up and becomes a recurring character. So yeah, I think this is like Sonic X's way of handling it, where he disappears during the Sonic Adventure 2 arc of the anime, and then he just kind of disappears for a bit until the 3rd season. If it is indeed Shadow in the capsule, that would be an interesting way for them to plot around that. So yeah, if it is indeed Shadow, I'm very interested, because that means he'll be back in the story again. But in any case, that is my review of Sonic X. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you want to help support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month, and it does really help me out. So if you guys absolutely want to go help me, then Patreon's the best way to do that. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas a bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But, regardless of whether or not you do any or all those things. Thank you guys so much for watching. As next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!